got a question for you. How would you like it if they presented you with one of those plug things from like the Matrix, where you could take all the training of the new products and the new systems and everything, just plug it into your brain and your team's brain and you'd know everything? How would that be? Yeah?
Okay, wait, I got another one. You, tomorrow morning, wake up, you step on the scale and you're down 30 pounds. Yes, thank you. And then you look out the window and your money tree is ready for harvest. Yeah, this isn't that kind of keynote.
But it's on my tip of my tongue, tip of my tongue.
You are in for a treat today.
Hello, Imagine Software. Hello, First National Bank of Omaha branch managers.
Let's give it up for Ann.
It's so good to be here. Thank you. I got to take you everywhere to introduce me.
The fact is, life is hard. Change is hard, and change is ever present in our lives. It's not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning how to dance in the rain. And I call it dancing in the discomfort zone, because as we go through life, it's gonna rain.
I think what makes my stuff resonate so well is that I've walked in their shoes. I've been on teams and led teams in global organizations through a lot of different change. It's uncomfortable and it's messy, and I've been there.
When I was 7, I came home from 2nd grade, and my parents said, "We're moving to Saudi Arabia." And I said, well, I don't know what that means. But by then, we had already moved a couple times, so I was taking change a little bit more in stride, which is a good thing, because since then, I've moved now 25 times to 4 different continents. I went to 13 different schools between kindergarten and my master's work, and God only knows how many hairdos I've had.
Okay, so I took years of research and knowledge and information and experience and just boiled it down into a very simple system, because when you're dealing with all the discomforts of change, you can't be thinking about stuff, I don't want to have to pull out a research manual to figure it out. I need a nice, simple system to be able to remember on Tuesday at 3:45 when I'm ready to rip my hair out.
So let's talk about this system. How do we start? 3 Ps. We identify the problem. We make a plan. And we punch it, Margaret. That is our dance. By identifying the problem, my problem, I'm not talking about what is our problem as a company, I'm talking about my personal problem with this. And by being able to talk about it, often we're able to turn from looking and banging on the door of the comfort zone to, all right, what's our possibility? Or our next P, what's our plan?
Change is a constant. It's not going away. And so as soon as we start thinking that it's something that's to be avoided, we're gonna not have as good of a life. And so I love what I do, because I get to help people understand that their discomfort with change is completely normal.
The fact is, from the porch, it's awful foggy out there on the way to the new comfort zone. So how do you want to say it? Yes, that's it!
Ann is simply amazing. You guys are gonna absolutely love her.
What a great message.
And I can tell you that was about as good as it gets.
Oh, fantastic.
Full of energy, but then she drives the point home.
Opportunity is infested with unknowns. And if you avoid them, you're never gonna have more than you have right now.
This is why I call it dancing in the discomfort zone. Because if you're dancing like this, you're doing it wrong. And it may be why you're single. We'll go through all the bad scenarios, and it's important to do that. But you also need to say, what happens if this goes catastrophically right?
You do not have to have all the answers. And I learned this when I was 11 years old. We were hiking in Nepal. Now, I lived in Saudi Arabia at the time. So when you live in Saudi Arabia, you don't go to Disney World in Florida, you go to Nepal because it's closer. So we were hiking in the Himalayas, and one night it poured. It just torrential downpour. Next morning we're hiking along, and I come to this river that is like raging, overflowing, just bloated and white caps and crazy angry river. And as I'm standing there mesmerized by this water, I recognize that there's a bridge under the water, like it's been washed over. And so I turn around to Santee, who was our guide, and he's chatting with a Sherpa who drops his bag and goes jogging up the path towards the village that we just were in. And I said, "Hey, Santee, where are we going?" He said, "We're going this way." And I looked at the river, and I looked at Santee, and I said, "Nuh-uh." And my type A American hotel manager father starts to try to solve it. He's been in Nepal for 3 days. He says, "All right, Santee, we're going to need another bridge." And Santee says, "Well, Mr. Al, there is another bridge. It's about 20 kilometers up the river, and we're going down." "Well, that won't work. That won't work. We're going to need a boat. Give me a boat." "Well, Mr. Al, there is a boat, but it's in the village across the river and down a little bit. We can't get it right now." Now, I'm 11 years old. I'm pretty sure my dad's an idiot already. Now, he's not. He's a really cool guy, but it took me about 30 more years to figure that out. So I'm like done with this conversation. As I'm walking, kicking rocks up the path, I hear my dad say something about a rope. "We need a rope." And I'm like, good God, this man's going to kill us. And so as I'm walking up the path, I see the Sherpa coming back. And behind him is 2 guys from the village. And behind them are 2 huge, gray, wrinkly elephants. And I did the same thing. I was like, "Oh." And I looked at Santee. I was like, "Oh." And he goes, "Yes, Annie, here's your bridge." And it took us about 10 minutes to get on the elephants, across the raging river, and off the elephants to continue on our way. We would never have come up with the elephant idea, right? It's not like, here in the US, we're like, "Oh, no problem, raging river, go get an elephant, bada bing, we're across," We wouldn't have thought of that had we not relied on the knowledge of the people who'd been there before and done that before. So make sure you're using your resources. You guys have a great resource here with FBLA. You are making lifelong connections with each other. You guys are going to be peers and colleagues your whole life. The adults that are here, utilize these resources. It's amazing what people will share with you if you say, "Hey, you know what? I'm noodling something and I know you've got experience with it. Can I buy you a taco and pick your brain?" It's amazing what people will do for tacos, right? Hamburgers, pizza work too, all right? Ask people. Ask for their help. You do not need to walk into these situations knowing all the answers or having to figure them out by yourself. So use those resources.
Hello, RCI leaders. It's Bonney again, here to talk to you a little bit more about those tough conversations. Now, it's one of the hardest things as leaders that we need to be able to do. And so the key is to learn how to do it better. That's going to help you build your confidence in having these conversations well. Now, that's the key. So let's go over some of the do's and don'ts that we talked about in our Leadership That People Want to Follow session. And then I want to add a few more to what you've got. All right, so our first do was find privacy. You want to make sure that you are protecting people's dignity, because it is really tough when you're in a tough conversation and you feel embarrassed because your boss is sitting there telling you that you're not doing something well. If you're having to do that, not only just with your boss, but with other people around, that's a really terrible experience. So this is especially relevant when you have to have one of those tough conversations in the moment. All right. Make sure you're finding a conference room, your office. Maybe it's the lunchroom where nobody is and you can close the door. Maybe it's just a quiet corner, but get them away from having to go through that with other people. Another do was be concise. This means say what needs to be said and then be quiet because it's time to listen. All right. Being concise will help you to have a message that's going to land a lot more effectively. If you're nervous about difficult conversations, stuff just starts coming out of your mouth. And sometimes it's justification stuff. Sometimes it's excuses. Well, I know you're not doing anything wrong, but But the problem with all of that is it muddies the message. If you've built that great foundation of trust and respect with that person on your team, it's going to be a lot easier to be able to just say, "Hey, we've got a problem that I want to talk to you about." Be concise. Third do is talk about the behavior. Now, this is kind of a confusing one, but when you're going in to talk to somebody or planning a conversation with somebody about something they're not doing well, it's really easy to jump to the judgment. And we really want to avoid doing that.
We want to talk about what are they doing. If we had a video camera on them, what would we see? All right. You might see, wow, that person has a bad attitude. But that's a judgment. I don't actually know what their attitude is because I can't see it. What I see is they're rolling their eyes. Okay. I don't see that they don't care about the project. I don't know if they don't care about the project. I don't know that until they say, hey, I don't care about the project. But what I'm seeing, the behavior is they miss deadlines. They're late for meetings. So make sure as you're planning to go in that you do talk about the behavior. Okay, think about it. What do I know? What are the facts? All right. Fourth one that we had on our list was allow for a timeout. If you notice that you're getting upset, that they're getting upset, allow for even just 2 minutes. And I use the excuse that's a little tacky, but you know what? It works. Hey, I really want to have this conversation. It is so important. And I have to go to the bathroom so bad. I'm so sorry. Let's take 2 minutes. Let me just run to the bathroom. I'll be right back. Right? That may make all the difference in that conversation being effective. And that other person being able to calmly respond in a way that you can actually solve the problem. All right. Now, maybe you're not comfortable with the bathroom excuse. That's fine. Go ahead and use a different one. All right. But think about it beforehand. Think about it to say, if I start notice their face gets hot, tears start coming down their eyes, or they start gripping the sides of the table, I'm going to say, hey, you know what? Let's just take 2 minutes. I got to run and just let somebody know I'm going to be late for a meeting. I'll be right back. Whatever you're comfortable with, but have a plan. Because if that conversation starts to go sideways, you want to be ready. Okay. To have that timeout. All right. 2 more I want to add. First of all, be curious. As you're walking into these tough conversations, don't assume you have all the answers. Don't assume that you know where they're coming from, what the problem is, and that you know every piece of the conversation. Walk in curious to find out more, to find out their perspective, where they're coming from, what challenges they're having, whatever questions it is, but go in curious rather than condescending. Because that is going to help you have a constructive dialogue with the other person where you might actually solve the problem. Imagine that. All right. So remember that you've got some control in that problem being solved. It's not just a one-way conversation. So go in curious to understand where they're coming from. What challenges are they having? What that's going to do is it's going to continue to build that foundation of trust and respect. That person's going to feel like, oh, you care about my side of this? Cool. And they might actually want to change their behavior. And that's the key. Leadership that people want to follow. Communication people want to participate in. All right. So go in curious. And last do is assume positive intent. I know I talked about this in our session, but especially when you're going into these tough conversations, make sure you're assuming the person has the good intentions, that they're not just out to ruin your day. They're not just out to destroy the company. They're not just out to be a jerk, because usually they're not. And so if I assume positive intent going into the conversation, or as somebody else said in one of my sessions, find the innocence, okay? Assume that they're not just bad people and that everything's terrible, right? If I go in with that assumption, I'm much more likely to have a constructive conversation. Okay, so those are our do's. Now let's talk about our don'ts for a sec. All right. First, don't overuse those words. You, why, should, always, and never. Okay. You can seem very accusatory, so watch that one. Now you're going to have to use sometimes, but make sure you're thinking about where you're using it. If you're using it in the beginning of it and saying, I want to talk to you because you are always late for meetings, it starts to feel very accusatory. So just be ready and think about how you're wording things. Why is another one? Can sound very much like an accusation, like a inquisition. Like, why'd you do that? It sounds like a judgmental question. So as you're planning, and we're going to talk about this in the confidence boosting one, but as you're planning your questions that you're going to ask, think about how you word them too, because the words matter. Should really focuses on the past. You should have known better. You should have done something different. Well, yeah, I know we're here now, right? So let's talk about the future. In the future, next time, try this. Okay. And then the last one is always and never. Always is always wrong and never is never right. Because if you say you're always late for meetings, they're going to think about that one time during their second week of work that they actually weren't late for a meeting and how you're wrong rather than I have a problem with lateness. All right. So avoid that. Be specific, be accurate. All right. Second one, don't be condescending. No adult wants to deal with that. And it's hard, like I said, because we learn tough conversations from our teachers and our parents and our principals in the first 18 years of our lives. It's easier to be condescending to a kid, though it's not as effective there either, but it's especially not effective with an adult at work. So make sure in your planning, you're thinking, do I sound like I'm wagging my finger and being condescending? And if so, how can I shift that? That's where role playing some of these tough conversations can be very helpful. It's uncomfortable. Yeah, but it's helpful. All right. Next one is don't do all the talking. Make sure you're listening. Make sure you, again, going curious, want to know their perspective. And the last one on our list is don't go in unprepared. Make sure you've thought about, how am I going to say this? What is the behavior that I'm talking about? What is the problem? Why is it a problem? What are some examples of it? Because they may not know. All right. So go in prepared. Another don't. Here's something that's kind of interesting from a body language standpoint. If you're having a tough conversation with somebody, try to avoid sitting directly across from them. All right. Preferably if you can get a round table and you can sit at 90 degrees, or maybe you can sit at either corner. Sitting directly across just feels very confrontational. They may not even recognize it, but it's going to impact the way that conversation goes. All right. So try to sit sideways. That's why, have you ever noticed sometimes if you're in the car and you're both heading down the road, that you can have some of the greatest, most vulnerable conversations, either with your teenagers, with your spouse, whatever, because you're not facing each other. It's not this kind of thing where we're looking right at each other. So think about that when you're planning how you're going to have this meeting. That's why a lot of people have a desk. A lot of leaders have a desk in their office and then a round table over there. It just allows you to sit a little more like this rather than straight on. So that could help you to just ease the tone in the room. And the last don't is don't just dive right into the conversation. You might want to set the tone for what you're going to talk about. You might want to set the tone by saying, hey, this may be a little uncomfortable. And if at any point you want to take a break for a couple minutes, please feel free. Let's do that. You know, setting it up a little bit to say, hey, I want to have a collaborative conversation. I want to solve a problem with you. And if you feel uncomfortable, let me know. But it is going to be a little uncomfortable. If you'd like to take a break, and start it tomorrow morning so you have a little time to think about it, set that up in the beginning. And that's going to set you up for a much more constructive conversation. All right. So think about some other do's and don'ts that you might want to add to your list. Remember that Crucial Conversations book. Carrie Patterson is one of the authors. Fantastic book for figuring out how to have these tough conversations well. And that could add some more do's and don'ts to your list. How do I want to get better and get better? Because it's the debrief after you have one that's going to help you get better and better, right? Asking yourself the questions. How did that go? What went well? What will I totally do again? What do I wish I'd done differently? What will I do differently next time? All right. And what am I going to do the same? Those 5 questions are going to help you to be able to get better and better at these tough conversations. So good luck. I'll see you on the next video.